Part 1. The Gate to the Unconscious. Have you ever woken up with the chilling sensation that your dreams were trying to tell you something urgent? A face you didn't recognize but somehow knew. A room that made no sense and yet felt more real than your own bedroom. A feeling that lingered for hours, long after the images themselves had faded. Tonight, we stop guessing. Your dreams are not random noise, static thrown off by a resting brain with nothing better to do. They are, in the words of the psychologist Carl Jung, letters written to you, in a language you were never formally taught, but that some older, deeper part of you has always understood. Tonight, we are going to learn to read that language again. We are entering the liminal space, the threshold between waking and sleeping, where the architecture of your inner world becomes visible. Tonight, we will meet two of its oldest residents, the Great Mother and the Wise Old Man, not as strangers, as parts of you, waiting, as they always have been, to be recognized. Let your body settle now into the bed beneath you. Let your breath begin to slow, deep, and unhurried, the way it does whenever something in you senses it's finally safe to stop keeping watch. Before we begin, a small anchor, as always, a way of letting your own subconscious know you are here, ready to listen. If you'd like, in the comments below, write, "I am ready to hear my dreams." You don't need to know yet what they'll say. The willingness to listen is where all of this begins. Let your eyes close. Let your jaw loosen. Let your hands go soft, wherever they happen to be resting. I want to explain gently why this particular hour, the hour of falling asleep, is so uniquely suited to this work. During full waking consciousness, the ego, the part of your mind responsible for logic, judgment, and self-image, works constantly to filter and organize experience. It decides what's relevant, what's threatening, what fits the story you tell about who you are. This is useful. It's how you function in a complicated world. But it also means the ego, most of the time, is standing guard at the door between your conscious mind and everything underneath it. As you drift toward sleep, that guard begins very naturally to step back from the door. Not because anything has gone wrong, but because rest requires it. The vigilant, organizing, judging mind loosens its grip, and in that loosening, something else becomes possible. The subconscious, usually muffled beneath the noise of daily analysis, gets a chance to speak more directly, more symbolically, more freely than it ever could during the busy hours of the day. This is the gate we're walking through tonight. Not a dramatic threshold, not something you need to force your way past. Simply the ordinary nightly loosening that already happens every time you fall asleep, whether or not you ever paid attention to it before. Jung believed the unconscious mind was not empty, not chaotic, not merely a wastebasket of forgotten memories. He believed it was intelligent, patterned, purposeful, communicating constantly, using a symbolic dialect far older than any spoken language. Dreams, in his view, were not decoration. They were correspondence. Messages sent nightly from the deeper architecture of the psyche to the small, conscious self that so rarely stops long enough to receive them. I want to say a little more about why Jung took dreams so seriously at a time when much of the psychological establishment around him was moving in the opposite direction, toward viewing the mind as something to be measured, categorized, and treated primarily through observable behavior. Jung by contrast, spent decades recording his own dreams in careful detail, and the dreams of his patients, and found again and again patterns too consistent, too structured, too meaningful to dismiss as random neural noise. He noticed that dreams often compensate for something one-sided in waking life, offering in symbol exactly what conscious awareness has been neglecting. A person who spends their waking hours entirely focused on logic and achievement might dream again and again of water, of emotion, of something soft and formless trying to get their attention. A person who has been too permissive, too accommodating in daily life might dream of walls, boundaries, locked doors, the psyche's own attempt to restore a balance the conscious mind has been avoiding. This compensatory function is worth remembering as you consider your own dreams, tonight and in nights to come. If a dream feels strange or even contradictory to how you understand yourself in daylight, that contradiction may be exactly the point. The unconscious offering a counterweight to whatever has become too heavy on one side of the scale. Most dreams draw from both layers at once, blending the intensely personal with the strikingly universal. A dream about your own childhood home might, in the same breath, be visited by a figure that feels far older than anything from your personal history, a hint that the collective layer has joined the conversation alongside the personal one. Let your breath continue, unhurried, as we prepare to meet two of the collective unconscious's oldest and most frequently encountered residents. Let your breath continue, slow, low, unhurried. In for 4 counts, out for 6. With every exhale, feel the ego's grip loosen just slightly further. Not vanishing, not needed to vanish. Only stepping back enough to let something else be heard. Part 2. Archetypes as Universal Architects. Let us meet now the two figures we mentioned at the very start of tonight's journey, not as mythological curiosities, but as living architects of your own inner world, figures who may have already appeared to you, in one disguise or another, in dreams you've long since forgotten. The first is the Great Mother. In dreams, she rarely appears exactly as your own mother. She is older than any single person, a pattern rather than a portrait, appearing as an ocean, a cave, a garden, an elderly woman offering food, or, in her more difficult form, something devouring, overwhelming, engulfing. She represents nourishment, but also the danger of too much nourishment, the comfort that can become smothering, the care that can become control. The second figure is the wise old man, the internal guide, appearing as a mentor, a stranger with unexpected knowledge, an old teacher, sometimes simply a voice, offering a single sentence that somehow changes everything. He represents accumulated wisdom, insight arriving exactly when it's needed, the part of you that already knows more than your conscious, everyday mind gives it credit for. When the wise old man appears, it is often at moments of genuine confusion or transition, and his appearance is rarely a coincidence. Jung believed that the psyche produces exactly the guide it needs, at exactly the moment it's needed, provided the dreamer is willing to actually listen when it arrives. I want you to consider, gently, whether either of these figures has visited you before, in whatever disguise your particular dreaming mind chose for them. Perhaps an unusually vivid stranger who offered advice. perhaps a landscape that felt maternal, holding, or in its darker form, suffocating. You don't need to recall a specific dream tonight. Simply let the possibility rest in your awareness, the way you might leave a door unlocked for a guest who hasn't arrived yet. Now, let us visualize together, gently, as you drift closer to sleep. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a quiet forest at dusk, the light soft and blue-gray, the air cool against your skin. Ahead of you, a path leads into the trees. You do not need to walk it quickly. Simply notice it's there, waiting, the way it has always been waiting. As you look down this path, imagine a figure emerging slowly from the tree line. An old man, weathered, calm, unhurried, carrying something you can't quite make out yet. This is your wise old man, arriving not to frighten you, but to walk beside you for whatever distance you're ready to go tonight. And somewhere behind you, imagine the presence of the Great Mother, not visible directly, but felt, the way you feel a held gaze from someone standing just outside your line of sight. Her presence is the ground beneath your feet, the air around you, the unseen support that has been holding you the whole time, even when you forgot to notice it. Let us add depth to these two figures before we continue the visualization, because understanding their fuller range will help you recognize them more easily in your own dreaming life. The Great Mother rarely appears only in her gentle form. Jung was careful to note that every archetype contains its full range, light and dark together, because the collective unconscious does not sanitize its patterns for comfort. The nourishing Great Mother, the fertile garden, the abundant table, the figure who feeds without condition, exists alongside her more difficult expression, the smothering embrace, the overgrown garden that has become a tangle, the flood that gives life and also drowns. Both expressions are worth noticing if she appears in your dreams. A dream in which you are held, fed, comforted by a maternal presence may be pointing toward a genuine need for more care in your waking life. A dream in which you are trapped, engulfed, unable to breathe within an overwhelming maternal presence may be pointing toward the opposite, a relationship or situation that has become suffocating, however loving its original intention. The wise old man, too, carries a shadow expression, though it appears less often. In his difficult form, he becomes not a guide, but a manipulator, a false wisdom, a seductive certainty that leads the dreamer astray rather than forward. This is worth knowing because not every voice of apparent authority in a dream deserves to be trusted uncritically. Part of the discernment this work asks of you is learning to distinguish a genuine inner guide from a more defensive, self-serving voice dressed in the guide's clothing. One useful test, which Jung himself often applied to his own inner dialogues, does this figure's guidance expand you, or does it shrink you? Genuine wisdom, even when difficult to hear, tends to leave you feeling more capable, more whole, more equipped to face what's ahead. False wisdom tends to leave you smaller, more dependent, more certain that only this particular voice holds the answer. Let us return now to the forest path, deepening the visualization we began earlier. Notice the quality of light around you. Is it growing dimmer as dusk settles further, or is there a soft glow somewhere ahead? Perhaps from the wise old man's lantern, perhaps from something else entirely. Notice the ground beneath your feet, soft with fallen leaves perhaps, or packed earth, cool and solid. This ground is the Great Mother's presence, made tangible, holding you steady with every step you take deeper into this inner landscape. There is one more figure worth introducing tonight, briefly, because it often accompanies the wise old man and the Great Mother in this deeper layer of the psyche. The archetype Jung called the trickster, the figure who appears as a fool, a jester, a chaotic disruptor of plans and expectations. In dreams, the trickster often shows up exactly when life has become too rigid, too controlled, too certain of its own rules, arriving to overturn the furniture, so to speak, and remind the dreamer that not everything needs to be managed so tightly. If a dream has ever taken an absurd, illogical, almost comedic turn, impossible physics, characters who shift identity mid-scene, situations that would be laughable if they weren't so vivid, this is very often the trickster's fingerprint. Rather than dismissing these dreams as simply strange, consider what part of your waking life might benefit from a little more looseness, a little less rigid control, a little more willingness to laugh at the absurdity of circumstances that feel, in daylight, unbearably serious. Let your breath continue, slow and unhurried, as we carry all three of these figures forward with us. The wise old man's guidance, the Great Mother's grounding, and the trickster's reminder that even this deep, careful work doesn't need to take itself entirely seriously all the time. You do not need to reach any particular destination on this path tonight. The walking itself is the practice, a slow, unhurried movement deeper into a part of yourself that rarely gets visited during the busy hours of waking life. Let both of these presences simply exist alongside you now as you continue drifting deeper into rest. You do not need a message from them tonight. You only need to know the path is here, and they are here, walking it with you the way they always have been, quietly beneath your waking awareness. Part 3. Navigating the Shadow and the Self. Not every figure that visits you in sleep arrives with the calm reassurance of the wise old man. Sometimes dreams bring images that frighten us, pursuers, monsters, fragmented scenes that dissolve the moment we try to look at them directly. Tonight, I want to offer you a different way of meeting these images, one that changes almost everything about how frightening they actually are. Not every figure that visits you in sleep arrives with the calm reassurance of the wise old man. Sometimes dreams bring images that frighten us, pursuers, monsters, fragmented scenes that dissolve the moment we try to look at them directly. Tonight, I want to offer you a different way of meeting these images, one that changes almost everything about how frightening they actually are. Jung believed that the frightening figures in our dreams are very rarely warnings of literal danger. Far more often, they are disguised messengers, carrying suppressed potential, parts of yourself that have been pushed into shadow, not because they are evil, but because somewhere along the way, they were deemed unacceptable, unsafe, or simply too much for the rooms you grew up in. A pursuer in a dream is very often not a threat to run from, but an unmet part of yourself trying to catch up. Anger you've disowned, ambition you've silenced, grief you've never let yourself feel in full. The chase feels terrifying only because the disowned part has been forced to shout in symbol what it could never say plainly while awake. Tonight, if a difficult figure has visited your dreams before, and if one visits tonight, I want to offer you a practice. Instead of running in your dream or in your memory of it, try turning to face it. not with hostility, but with the same curiosity you might offer any stranger arriving with an urgent message. Ask, gently, even now, in this half-waking state, what are you trying to show me? This single shift, from fleeing to facing, is often enough to change the entire emotional tone of a recurring dream. Pursuers that are turned to face very often stop pursuing. Monsters that are asked their name very often soften into something far more ordinary, far more human, far closer to a forgotten piece of yourself than an external threat.
Let us practice this now, gently, in visualization. Picture, if you're willing, any image that has troubled you in past dreams. Need not be vivid, need not be exact. Simply let an impression arise. Now, instead of turning away from it, imagine turning toward it, slowly, the way you might turn toward a sound in another room, curious rather than afraid. Imagine asking it simply, what do you carry that I have been unwilling to carry myself?
You do not need an answer to arrive immediately. Sometimes the question alone is enough to begin the work. The shadow, once acknowledged even slightly, tends to soften its intensity. Not because it has disappeared, but because it no longer has to shout to be noticed. Let us speak, too, of a particular category of dream that deserves special attention: the anxiety dream. The one where you're falling, or unprepared for an exam you didn't know was happening, or discovering a room in your house you never knew existed. These dreams are so common across cultures and eras that they too deserve to be understood as part of the collective, rather than purely personal, symbolic language. The falling dream, for instance, often arrives during periods when something in waking life feels genuinely unsupported. A loss of structure, a decision made without enough certainty beneath it, a sense of losing control over circumstances that matter. The dream is not predicting disaster. It is naming, in its own vivid language, a feeling the waking mind may have been too busy or too defended to name directly. The discovered room dream, finding an unknown space within a familiar house, is one of the most reliably positive symbols in this entire nocturnal language, however unsettling it may feel in the moment. It very often represents unclaimed potential, an aspect of the self not yet explored, becoming available to conscious awareness for the first time. If this dream visits you in any of its many variations, it is rarely cause for alarm. It is closer to an invitation. Let us return to the practice of facing rather than fleeing, and extend it a little further tonight. I want you to imagine, if a shadow figure has arisen in your visualization already, asking it a second question, once the first has been offered space to settle. What would happen if I stopped running from you? Notice whatever image or feeling arises in response. Sometimes the figure changes shape entirely. A monster softening into a frightened child. A pursuer revealing itself to be simply a messenger who was never actually chasing you, only trying clumsily, urgently to catch your attention. This reframing from threat to messenger is in many ways the single most useful shift this entire practice can offer you. Once a dream figure is understood as communication rather than danger, an enormous amount of nighttime fear tends to lose its grip. Not because the images stop appearing, but because your relationship to them fundamentally changes. As we move deeper into this practice, I want to introduce the idea Jung considered the ultimate destination of this entire inner journey: the self. Not the small, everyday ego, but the larger center of the whole psyche, where your personal identity meets something far older and more universal, the same deep current that produces the great mother, the wise old man, and the shadow in every dreaming mind across every culture and era. You do not need to reach this center tonight. Very few people do in a single sitting, and that has never been the goal. The goal is simply to walk a little further toward it than you were before, trusting, as the old traditions taught, that each night's dreaming brings you incrementally closer, whether or not the destination is ever fully, consciously reached. Let your breath settle. Slow, low. In for 4, out for 6. Whatever shadow figures walk with you tonight, in dream or in memory, know that they are not enemies. They are, each one, simply... Part 4. Decoding the Nocturnal Language. Let us speak now, more practically, about how to translate the abstract landscapes of dream into something usable in your waking life. Because dreams, however symbolic, are rarely disconnected from what's actually happening in your days. The first principle worth understanding is that dream symbols are rarely universal in any fixed dictionary sense, despite what many popular dream interpretation guides suggest. A snake does not mean the same thing to everyone. It depends on your own relationship to snakes, your culture, your personal history. Jung was clear that the dreamer is always the best interpreter of their own symbols, because the unconscious speaks in the dreamer's own personal dialect, built from their own particular life, layered on top of the older, more universal patterns we've discussed tonight. This means the most useful question to ask about any dream image is rarely, what does this symbol mean in general, but rather, what does this image mean to me, specifically, given what I know of my own life? A house in a dream might represent the psyche itself in one dreamer, and a literal, unresolved worry about homeownership in another. Context, always, is everything. I want to offer a simple technique for this translation work, one you can use whenever you wake with a dream still fresh in memory. Ask yourself 3 questions, in order. First, what was the dominant feeling in the dream? Not the plot, but the emotional temperature underneath it. Second, where in my current life do I feel that same emotional temperature, even in a completely different context? Third, what is this dream suggesting I might do, feel, or acknowledge that I haven't yet done, felt, or acknowledged in my waking hours? This 3-question method works because dreams, more than almost anything else in psychological life, are remarkably honest about feeling, even when they're wildly inventive about plot. The feeling in a dream is rarely disguised. It is usually the plainest, most reliable clue to what the dream is actually about. Let us speak too about lucid awareness, a technique for maintaining a thread of consciousness even as you drift into deeper sleep, allowing you to witness the transformation of dream symbols in something closer to real time, rather than only reconstructing them afterward from fragmented memory. The simplest entry point into this practice is a small, repeated intention, planted now as you drift towards sleep. I will notice when I am dreaming. You do not need to force this. Simply plant the intention gently, the way you might set an alarm you don't expect to need, but want available all the same. If, during tonight's sleep, you find yourself aware that you are dreaming, even briefly, you can practice a simple technique. Pause within the dream and look closely at your hands or at any repeating detail in the dream landscape. This simple act of close observation often stabilizes lucid awareness,
allowing you to remain present a little longer inside the symbolic conversation, rather than being swept along passively by it. Let us add one more practical layer to tonight's decoding work. The difference between what Jung called the manifest content of a dream, the literal plot, the surface story, and its latent content, the underlying psychological material the surface story is dressed around. Understanding this distinction changes how you listen to your own dreams considerably. Consider a dream where you miss an important flight. On the manifest level, the dream is about travel, timing, missed connections. But the latent content, the deeper material the surface story is dressed around, might be about a missed opportunity in waking life, a fear of being left behind, a sense that time is moving faster than your capacity to keep pace with it. The plot is rarely the point. The plot is simply the costume the deeper material puts on for the night's performance. Consider a dream where you miss an important flight. On the manifest level, the dream is about travel, timing, missed connections. But the latent content, the deeper material the surface story is dressed around, might be about a missed opportunity in waking life, a fear of being left behind, a sense that time is moving faster than your capacity to keep pace with it. The plot is rarely the point. The plot is simply the costume the deeper material puts on for the night's performance. I want to offer a further technique, one Jung himself used extensively with his patients, called active imagination, a practice of continuing to engage with a dream image after waking, rather than letting it simply fade. This can be done through writing, through drawing, or, as we're practicing tonight, through guided visualization, returning to a dream figure or scene in a relaxed, half-waking state, and allowing the imagery to continue moving forward, rather than treating the original dream as a finished, closed story. If a particular dream has stayed with you, recurring, or simply unusually vivid, you might try this practice on your own in the coming days. Close your eyes, recall the dream's central image, and simply ask it, gently, what happens next? Let your imagination continue the scene without forcing a particular outcome. Very often, the continuation offers exactly the resolution or insight the original dream was building toward, but hadn't yet completed. Let us also speak briefly of dream journaling, since it remains one of the simplest and most effective tools for developing this whole practice over time. The mechanics are simple. Keep something to write with near your bed, and the moment you wake, before reaching for anything else, jot down whatever fragments remain, even a single image, even just a feeling, if that's all that's left. Dreams fade remarkably quickly, often within the first few minutes of waking, and this small habit, practiced consistently, trains the waking mind to hold on to material it would otherwise lose entirely. Over weeks and months of this practice, patterns tend to emerge that are invisible from any single night's entry. Recurring figures, recurring settings, recurring emotional tones, forming gradually into something like a map of your own particular symbolic language, unique to you, built from your own life. I want to address, too, why certain images seem to return to us again and again across months or even years. Recurring dreams, the same house, the same unfinished task, the same figure appearing in slightly different forms each time. Jung considered these recurring visions particularly significant because they represent not a single message, but an ongoing developmental thread. The same psychological work revisited repeatedly as your capacity to understand. A recurring dream is not a sign that nothing is changing. It is closer to a teacher who returns to the same lesson, each time with slightly more nuance, because the student has grown just enough to receive a little more of it than they could the last time around. Let your breath continue, slow and easy. Whatever images tonight's sleep brings you, know that they arrive not as chaos, but as continuation, the next installment in a conversation that has been ongoing quietly your entire life. Part 5. Integration and Waking Wisdom. Let us pause here and move slowly through the body, gathering together what tonight's journey has touched, before we move toward integration and rest. Bring your attention to your forehead, where the analytical mind, the ego, has spent all day standing guard. Let it soften now, the guard finally stepping back from the door, unhurried, unafraid. Bring your attention to your chest, where the Great Mother's steady presence has been felt throughout tonight's journey. Let it rise and fall freely, held, supported, nourished. Bring your attention to your hands, which may have imagined reaching toward a shadow figure tonight, turning to face rather than flee. Let them rest now, open, having done the brave, quiet work of turning toward rather than away. Bring your attention to your whole body, walking that forest path alongside the wise old man, grounded by the Great Mother beneath your feet, no longer alone in this inner landscape, however far into it you've traveled tonight. Let us speak now of what happens after tonight's sleep, because insight, however profound, means little if it dissolves the moment your eyes open in the morning. Jung believed that the relationship between the dreaming mind and the waking self should be a genuine feedback loop, not a one-way transmission. The dream offers material. The waking mind, ideally, receives it, reflects on it, and slowly, over time, allows it to reshape how a life is actually lived. Without this loop, dreams remain interesting, but inert. Fascinating stories that never quite touch the ground of daily decisions. I want to offer you a simple anchor for closing this loop, one you can use starting tomorrow morning, regardless of whether you remember tonight's dreams in detail. Before reaching for your phone, before the day's noise begins, take 30 seconds, still lying in bed, and ask simply, what feeling am I waking with? Not what happened in the dream, if it's already fading, just the feeling. This single question, asked consistently, trains the waking mind to stay in contact with the deeper current Jung believed was speaking all along. Let us imagine, together, one last time tonight, the figures who have walked with us on this journey. The wise old man, still present somewhere along that forest path. The Great Mother, still felt rather than seen, holding the ground beneath you. Whatever shadow figure met your gaze earlier and softened in the meeting. Imagine thanking them, quietly, for their company tonight, not as a formality, but as a genuine acknowledgement that this inner architecture, however invisible during your busy waking hours, has been working on your behalf the entire time, offering guidance in the only language it has ever fully trusted: symbol, image, feeling, dream. Let us speak, too, of patience, because integration, like every part of tonight's journey, unfolds slowly, in layers, rather than arriving all at once in a single dramatic revelation. You may wake tomorrow with no memory at all of tonight's images, and that does not mean the work has failed. The unconscious operates on its own timeline,
often delivering its clearest insights days or even weeks after the dream that planted them, once waking circumstances create the right conditions for the insight to finally surface into conscious awareness.
I want to offer one final practice before we descend fully into stillness. A simple bridge-building exercise between tonight and tomorrow. Imagine now a single word or image that captures something of tonight's journey. Perhaps the forest path, perhaps the wise old man's lantern, perhaps simply the felt sense of turning to face rather than flee. Hold this image gently in your awareness now, and imagine it waiting for you tomorrow morning, the first thing available to your mind before the day's noise arrives.
This is not about forcing memory. It is about planting a small thread, deliberately, between tonight's inner work and tomorrow's waking hours. The same feedback loop Jung considered essential to real psychological growth, rather than growth that stays contained entirely within the dreaming hours, disconnected from the life it's meant to inform.
Let this connection settle into you now as a kind of inner compass, not something you have to consciously manage or remember perfectly, but something available, quietly, whenever you need it, the way a compass needle finds north without anyone telling it how. We have walked a long road tonight, through the gate of the unconscious, past the great mother and the wise old man, through a shadow turned to face rather than flee, into the practical work of translating symbol into waking wisdom. Feel your body now, heavy against the bed. Your legs, your back, your shoulders, the back of your head. Let the whole of you settle fully into rest. Before the final stillness takes hold, let us picture one last time the entire landscape we've walked through tonight. The gate at the edge of waking, the forest path with its patient guide, the ground held steady by an older, nourishing presence, the shadow figure turned to face rather than flee, and the trickster's quiet reminder not to hold any of it too tightly. All of this lives within you already. None of it was borrowed from outside. Tonight's journey was simply a slow, patient walk through rooms that have always been part of your own inner architecture, waiting, as they always do, for the ordinary nightly loosening that lets them finally be visited. Tomorrow and every night after, this same gate will open again, whether or not you consciously remember tonight's specific images. The conversation between your waking and dreaming minds does not require perfect memory to continue. It only requires your willingness, night after night, to keep showing up at the threshold. You do not need to remember every image from tonight's journey. The unconscious does not require perfect conscious recall to have received what it needed. Whatever conversation begins tonight will continue quietly in whatever dreams arrive and in whatever quiet feeling greets you tomorrow morning. Let your breathing return to its own natural rhythm now, unmanaged, unguided, the same rhythm that has carried you into sleep every night of your life, long before you knew the names Jung or archetype or shadow. The mind is now a calm place to rest. Somewhere beneath this stillness, the letters are already being written. Let them come. Let yourself receive them. Rest now.